Welcome to Alembic Strategy. Our Meaningful Human Leadership Conference is coming up, and I am hugely excited to be interviewing one of our key speakers, Dr. Amina Aitsi-Selmi, who has written a rather wonderful blog article on our website in preparation for the conference. Hello, Amina.
Hello. Hi, Nick.
Hi, tell everyone a little bit about you.
So my name is Amina Aitsi-Selmi. I'm a doctor by background, a medical doctor. I specialize in global health policy. And now I coach leaders, entrepreneurs, doctors, professionals, scientists, and I help them throw out their 5-year plans and focus on what energizes them. And that usually helps them achieve better outcomes for them and their organizations.
So completely delighted to have you as a speaker at our conference, and I absolutely can't wait. So we're going to talk a bit about that in a minute, but the blog that you wrote was excellent, and I just thought it'd be great for you and I just to talk it over. Folks, you can go to our website there, www.alembicstrategy.com, and just click on the blog link, and you'll find Amina's article up front if you want to read the whole thing. Really fabulous piece of writing on meaning in the machine world, and 3 great tips that we're going to come on to. But I just wanted to pick out this word disruptive. We were talking about the humans at work, leaders and team, and this idea of the dichotomy between being the disruptive and being the disrupted. So everyone in their business model these days is looking to disrupt, but what does it mean to be disrupted, and how do we cope with that? Because I think, you know, everyone can see that through the Industrial Revolution, disruption is now sort of entering almost every sphere of life. So, you know, tell us about that.
Well, that's a huge topic, Nick, but obviously a very important one. And disruptions, kind of buzzwords going around at the moment because of technology and AI and all these things, which means that organizations can't rely on their structures for too long. There are no job descriptions that can last very long. So there's a sense of constant change. And with constant change comes a sense of uncertainty. And as humans, we don't like uncertainty very much. We prefer comfort. So there's a call for us as humans to try and make sense of this and try to be with that uncertainty without losing our heads and our hearts completely. So this is where I think there are some changes that could be made in organizations, by leaders, and by every individual, to be in this new world, in this new environment, in a way that's sane and healthy and helps us to continue to work.
You got some absolutely fantastic tips, but just we'll come on to those in just a second. But just staying here with the title, I think we are seeing in business a need to stay competitive and keep that competitive edge, but technology is key to that, and at the same time it has unforeseen negative side effects for the workforce, because, you know, we talked about disruption over the ages, you know, from the sort of classic weavers, maybe you could take mining, maybe you could take sort of manufacturing, and now we're talking about thinking. So maybe the potential in the next 10 to 20 years is actually the machines do quite a lot of the thinking, and they already do. So, you know, it's great and it's exciting and it's vibrant, and the world is changing rapidly around us. At the same time, we have to deal with what happens to the people.
Yeah, and I referenced the report by McKinsey & Co. of 46 countries, where they've estimated that up to 30% of work activities could be automated by 2030, and that jobs will look significantly different. So the jobs we have today might not exist. There might be new jobs, or the jobs will look very different. So that's certainly a challenge. It doesn't mean we don't require thinking, but we might need to be more refined about what thinking we do. What thinking can be done by machines. If you can put something in an algorithm, then a machine probably can do it. But that's not creative thinking. So that's definitely something that humans can still claim as their own, I think, at this stage. That creative ideation, being able to pull ideas out of thin air and go to the moon, will still be the preserve of humans for the foreseeable future, I think. I'm sure there are people, other experts who would disagree, but certainly I know that some experts do think that is what differentiates us, is that creative ideation.
I think we sort of see also, just going back to the human condition, we're starting to talk about the space where there might still be relevancy, but in the human condition, there's a huge increase in the sort of fluidity of life in the modern age, and maybe we're entering this sort of age of the disrupted, where all the certainties of the past are disappearing, and the mindset, of the human being in the workforce in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years has to get used to the idea that everything is uncertain and all the past certainties have moved on and everything's become fluid. And I think that's kind of like where your article is pushing us to think, what do we do about that? How do we as human beings respond? And I really love this first one. So your great first shout out was an encouragement, and this idea that one of the things that we really need to get our heads around is continuous personal growth. Tell us a little bit about that.
So, in a sense, life has always been uncertain, but we've been shielded by it, from it over the last 150 years or so, as our quality of life improved and our material life improved. So the uncertainty has always been there, and there are periods of life where we do face that uncertainty. But instead of that being occasional, we might have to start seeing it as something more perpetual, which puts us in more direct contact with real life. It is always changing. It's a constant process. There's nothing really fixed about life. That's just our imagination. So kind of coming back down to earth a little bit, and seeing that this is natural, and tapping into our higher cognitive faculties, in dealing with the uncertainty that looks threatening, but might not be. And I want to make clear that I don't think that's a task. That's just, the onus isn't just on individuals, it's also on organizations and leaders to make sure the culture encourages this kind of adaptability and growth, but providing the resources and the environment for that, not expecting it to just be a private endeavor.
I thought it was quite interesting. You made the point about the need for psychological safety in your article here, to encourage people to sort of really commit to the constant change.
Yeah, and there's a vicious cycle that's set up when you have a feeling, when people experience uncertainty, that they retreat into themselves and the survival mechanisms come up, and that creates a competitive environment, and feeds into a culture that doesn't feel very safe, or where you feel you might be attacked or dismissed or fired at any point for the smallest mistake, and so that you don't feel psychologically safe to really discuss your real challenges, your real issues, and that can be a risk both for the individual but also for the organization.
Interesting survey that you showed as well, which showed that actually sort of pushing on into high-performing teams, sense of psychological safety, like the idea that it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to fail, a really important part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's research, and I mentioned Project Aristotle, where psychological safety was the #1 factor for high-performing teams. It's not talent, it's not the combination of talent. It was this feeling that the team had, that they'd be able to really speak about their experience, that seemed to be the magic ingredient.
I think we talk about this a lot. I'm just going to move on to the next idea. So this concept of fight, flight, and fear, which is just core to the human. We were chatting earlier on, Amina, about the state of the human being a sort of evolved lower tier predator that's somehow managed to get to the apex and is kind of like a frightened lion, theoretically at the top of the chain of predators, but not adapted to being there, and constantly in the sense of fear. But just taking the Project Aristotle idea on a little bit further, your next point is about becoming more entrepreneurial, which obviously requires people to be okay with the idea of loss.
Yes. So the entrepreneurial mindset is fantastic in dealing with uncertainty. That's what entrepreneurs are great at. They have big ideas, they dream big, and then they go and make it happen. But they take huge risks, financial, material, psychological, on that journey. And it's also got an innovation function in the economy. So entrepreneurs help to make sure new products, new services, new things happen within a stable capitalist economy. So I think we'll see more of that in the future, and I can see how it's helped me, and it's helped some of my clients, and I've seen research on it as well, saying that adopting this mindset is really helpful in dealing with this age of disruption and uncertainty, because you kind of, instead of running away from risk and uncertainty, you're embracing it and turning it into an opportunity to create and innovate.
And certainly with leading people, we found this to be a hugely valuable idea for some, where the opportunity ahead has been disrupted, and so there's a need to pick up on this concept of entrepreneurialism and actually create the new and get teams involved in genuinely entrepreneurial projects at work, or help them learn that so that it's much more fluid as to where their career might go after a certain point. And we're seeing people do that. We've been involved in a couple of projects recently where clients have been looking at taking a senior exec and placing them in an entrepreneurial space within the business, or even outsourcing that and investing in that. And then also taking teams, maybe not quite at that senior space, but just taking them away from their core tasks and getting them engaged with really interesting, innovative customer service type projects, which do require an entrepreneurial approach to make them work. And the amount of learning that is going into those projects is intense. Obviously, could be used in any space thereafter. So from a career development point of view, it's amazing, and still a win-win, I would say.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think if more of those case studies or findings are shared, I think it'll encourage other leaders. Again, bringing us back to this idea of psychological safety, so you can try and fail, but it's not really failure because it's learning, and be able to talk about it. I think that's really important in a culture of continuous learning and growth.
Which kind of takes us on to your last point in your blog, which is the idea of what can leaders reform, and this idea we should look out for toxic work culture and reform that. So tell us about that, Amina.
So again, coming back to the idea we were discussing earlier, which is elaborated on in Noah Yuval Harari's book *Sapiens*, that we were at the bottom of the food chain, and the cognitive revolution happened about 70,000 years ago, and suddenly we were able to ideate and create shared myths and cultures, and we invented things, and now we have a finger over a nuclear button, but we haven't quite evolved to understand we're not really unsafe. That we're at the top of the food chain now, and we're potentially destroying our environment. So reforming cultures away from something that's very competitive, that's rooted in these survival behaviors that are completely maladaptive, really, and creating a safety for people to take risks and innovate and have space to adapt to whatever's going on, and turning that into opportunity, I think is a core function of leaders, and will result in a healthier culture.
I mean, you've seen this, haven't you, through some of the big organizations that you've been involved with, which you talk about some of the negative side effects of toxic work culture where it's over competitive. Just tell me about some of the things that you see in people.
Well, the sense that you have to keep running or you'll fall through the cracks, and there's no safety net, is extremely damaging, and leads people to do more than they can and sacrifice important things. And then it's a vicious cycle, because the important things in your life have been stripped away, and you're left with this on this hamster wheel to nowhere. So recently there was talk of moral injury. It's an expression that's been used in the military industry, but someone's transposed it. It's been transposed to the healthcare industry. And that if you're in an environment where you're constantly pushed beyond your limits and pushed to compromise on values of care and compassion and empathy and collaborativeness to be able to deliver results, then you're going to there's going to be problems, and that's not acceptable.
Really three fantastic ideas from you. If folks want to go and read more about what Amina has to say on these things, then jump up on our website and just click on the blog, and you can find it there. So it's three big tips so leaders can encourage personal growth. And I love your point about learning being something that doesn't depreciate. Supporting the entrepreneurial mindset and really getting people into much wider and greater learning, and also into the concept of how risk plays a part in all of that. And then looking out for that toxic work culture with really negative side effects for folks, and looking to reform any toxic work culture that you find. It's really fantastic ideas, and very exciting kind of general conversation, which we're going to pick up on and elaborate on in a much wider sense, with loads of examples of how to the conference coming up in the summer. We're coming to hear you at the Meaningful Human Leadership Conference, Amina, on the 12th of June. Tell us a little bit about what you're going to be covering.
So yeah, thank you. I really look forward to it. So I was going to do a transposition from the healthcare sector into the wider business sector. So using a model called the mortality and morbidity meeting or audit, which, as you can imagine, can be is going to involve some difficult conversations, because you're essentially talking about life and death issues, and you're talking about individuals who have responsibility in the life or death of a patient. So huge psychological safety is needed to be able to have those conversations. So I was going to bring that model and see if we can use that in a business setting, in a wider business setting. It's not necessarily life or death, but it might be something else. So what is your organizational culture doing, and how many burnouts is it responsible for? How much moral injury is it responsible for? And have a very safe, honest conversation around that, so we can move forward.
I think that's going to be amazing. I think it's hugely needed, and for me, the level of conversation you need to have in that environment, where people are likely to die if you get it wrong. There's a compelling need and an urgency which raises the bar in terms of the quality of the conversation you're prepared to have. I don't think that that's seen much across the business space, but just imagine if you could take your meaningful conversations in terms of leading challenging, difficult, tough projects to that kind of level. What level of learning you could get if you could crack through and get to the real vulnerabilities, the real honesty, which is, we talk about radical candor, radical honesty, the truth, which allows people to work out how to move forwards with things, which has to be done in a certain environment. It's really tough to do that, but amazing feedback and incredible learning if you can get there. So that sounds massively exciting. I definitely want to come and listen to you speak about that. If you enjoyed that conversation, folks, come onto our website and read Amina's blog, and you'll find a page for the conference where you can click and have a look around and see who else is speaking and register. If you're a client, then there's a client discount available for you. If you want a block booking, just get in touch and we can give discounts for block bookings. So we hope to see you at the conference, and we can hear more from the wonderful Amina.
Thank you very much, Nick. I look forward to the conference.